Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today I'm going to talk with you about toxic femininity. This is such an important topic that I need to address it now, even though I was originally planning on addressing it much later, since I'd already touched upon it in a video I did on the topic of toxic masculinity, which is a bullshit concept that is just feminist propaganda. But I interrupted your regularly scheduled programming and inserted this video into the script as early as possible because I recently discovered when the topic of toxic femininity is being discussed online, at least where it shows up in search results, in articles and such that come up if you were to Google it or type it into DuckDuckGo, these articles are just more feminist propaganda, which are using the term toxic femininity, kind of appropriating it and changing it to mean when a woman acts misogynistic towards other women. So, for instance, their examples are things like a woman telling another woman to be more ladylike, be more feminine, or a woman telling another woman to be more traditional, right? To do something that is more of a traditional female role, like something a housewife would do. Or it could even be a woman telling another woman that she should put more effort into her appearance. Or it could be women objectifying other women. Anything that you could call misogynistic coming from a woman is what feminists are calling toxic femininity. And they're ignoring the much greater issue of, what is really toxic in female nature, because obviously, they don't want to make women look bad. They don't want to have their faults and flaws be scrutinized like they do with men's when they're accusing us of toxic masculinity and calling out bad behaviors of ours that affect them. They don't want it to be about how women affect men. But it is. And, female nature is incredibly toxic, not just to other women, which it is, but to other men. And for more reasons than them just being misogynistic. Okay, the toxic nature of femininity is not due to women being misogynistic towards other women, which isn't a real issue, honestly. So now I'm going to be exposing the truth about females' toxic nature and all of the toxic traits that women exhibit that have such a great effect on society, and both men and women alike. The first one, and perhaps least of it, is superficiality, which women take to an extreme, and that is what makes it so problematic. All right, not that everyone has to be deep, but extreme superficiality is something that leads to other issues, such as the next one, which is narcissism. And this can range in behaviors from entitlement-based behaviors to egomaniacal behaviors. So let's talk about their entitlement first. One of the toxic traits of that is them acting condescending and belittling towards others, thinking of themselves as queens, which causes them to treat others like servants, right? But then there's egomaniacal behaviors as well that go along with narcissism, such as when they don't get their way. They get very toxic in that they cause drama and are very argumentative, start fights and such. And that leads me to the next thing that happens on top of that, which is women love to form cliques and rivalries. They don't just like to get into arguments one-on-one, but they like to garner support from others and create a supportive social circle or clique, and then create a huge rivalry between that group and another group. And things just tend to get out of hand, which then leads to the next toxic trait, which is scheming. Women love scheming. A lot of their social life often revolves around it, honestly. You can even see it in women's shows. Women love watching women scheme and socialize with their social group, and that's because that's exactly what they're all about. And one of the most common ways of doing this is the next toxic trait, which is gossip and spreading negative rumors about others to destroy their reputation, such as calling a woman that she's competing with sexually a slut, saying that she's slept with lots of guys unprotected, that she's not safe to have sex with. These are the types of common toxic behaviors that women exhibit. And another one is violation of boundaries and invasion of others' privacy, including male safe spaces. All right, even male safe spaces aren't secure, like this channel. We have to defend against female invaders, even though this is a space intended for men. I've got no way to keep women out without keeping you men out. So we have to be able to assert our own boundaries, which are going to be constantly pushed and violated by women trying to invade our safe space. The Boy Scouts was invaded as well. And women love invading the privacy of others, even those they call friends, to try to get information that might be useful to them, because they treat people like social utilities. Even if you're with them, even if you're part of their clique and not their rivalry, they're going to want to learn about you so that they can know how to garner favor and use you as a social utility and everything, and manipulate you if need be. And they're going to, of course, violate boundaries of their rivals, as well. They don't have any respect for their rivals whatsoever. And this is because socializing to women is not just about recreation, but this brings me to the next toxic trait, that it's about sociopathic social climbing. And they often do things such as befriending people due to that person's position or status in society, and what social utility they could provide for them, and they will use their friends to help them and then discard them when they are done with them, and completely devalue them, or maybe even deceive them and throw them under the bus to get ahead. These are just the things that sociopathic social climbers do, and mainly are done by women. Women are mainly the ones who do this type of social climbing and play these types of Machiavellian games. So women are often guilty of three things, which are lying, manipulation, and cheating. Not just cheating sexually on their partners or cheating in games, but cheating in life, doing things that are unfair, cutting corners, being unjust, breaking the rules, etc. And obviously these are toxic behaviors. They are taboos. They are taught against in religion as immoral. They are preached against. They are preached about in religion as being immoral and discouraged, even as sins. And these are basically like women's bread and butter. Another big toxic tendency that I know all of you out there probably had even the least toxic women do to you, which is breaking promises and commitments, flaking on obligations, no showing appointments, or canceling at the last minute without a good reason. Even when she's in a situation where she really shouldn't be doing that, even if she's given these people reason to depend upon her being there, like it's her fucking employer, and he needs her there doing her job for the company to function. And she doesn't care. Women don't care if they're having a negative impact on someone's schedule or their business, if they're putting them out. Oftentimes, women don't even keep a schedule, and they basically will make plans and commitments, and what they're actually doing moment to moment, day to day, is just, whatever they feel like, right? And they've made plans and commitments, which to them, they see just as like options that they could do, and they just don't care if they are putting other people out by making these commitments that they can't show for. And this is a huge issue for me as an entrepreneur. When I first started my company, I would have women sign up for appointments for services with me and not show. And, I'd reserve that hour of time for them, and I'd be waiting for them, taking time out of my day, which is costing me money. And then when I would have women ask me if I was hiring or if I could promote them as an affiliate, stuff like that, and I would make meetings with them that were for their benefit. They would often not show up. When I would work with women, they would often just be very flaky and undependable, and it really cost me a lot of money, time, and energy, and really slowed down the development of my business. So, this doesn't just happen on the dating front, and obviously it's very disappointing when a woman flakes on a date, but that's something you should expect, and that's like recreational social time, so you could still be out and about when you do that. But this can have a very negative impact on someone's business or schedule and, their lifestyle too. If women are making obligations and commitments to people that they're not upholding, that actually does hurt people economically. You're abusing their time and energy and sometimes money. But this is something women are just famous for. But yeah, they hate it when people do it to them, and they won't stand for it, of course, because that is just one of the double standards that makes up the hypocrisy. That is the next big toxic trait, is that women are hypocritical, and all of their standards are basically double standards. They are always demanding things of others that they themselves wouldn't do for that person. They're always going to want to be right and make others out to be wrong, even if she has wronged them. And then another toxic trait, which is perhaps the biggest result of the first one I listed at the beginning of superficiality, is their rampant consumerism and hoarding of unnecessary material goods and deep financial debt, for which she will not want to be held responsible, which, is basically like abusing the economy, and the whole welfare system, the credit system. It is a huge source of inflation and one of the reasons why the economy is doing so poorly. So, women's toxic tendencies do have a very negative impact on society and the greater good. And this rampant consumerism and debt leads to the next toxic tendency, which is women's tendency to use and exploit others for their benefit and resources, namely being the financial predators of men in gold-digging hypergamy, and women exploiting men for their money and resources, and just, using them as social utilities under the guise of love and marriage, these things that are supposed to be sacred. That is an extremely psychopathic thing to do, especially when, she just discards him at the end and leaves him ruined, right? But that leads me to the next toxic trait, which is that women have unhealthy romantic relationships. Their relationships are unhealthy for the men. They are basically like a symbiotic relationship that a parasite has with its host, which in the realm of psychology is characterized by what you would call codependence. Basically, the woman gets the man emotionally and sexually and psychologically and otherwise dependent upon her, then gets him to sign over half of his resources in a legally binding marriage contract, getting him legally and financially dependent upon her partnership, and then controlling him with coercive behavior, keeping him basically addicted to her while she abuses that dependence and exploits him and hurts him, does things that are harmful to his psyche, to his well-being, his livelihood, and as I said, leaves him in ruins. And one of the ways in which she's able to do this, to create this dynamic, is through the next toxic tendency, which is seduction and using her sexuality for manipulative purposes, which is again, a very toxic and pretty immoral way to use sexuality and the act of making love to someone, because it's not just sexuality. They're actually making these men fall in love with them, thinking that they're making love and they have this special bond. Using their sexuality and seduction for these manipulative purposes is extremely immoral. And the sexual bond between husband and wife is supposed to be a sacred one. Even a couple where the man is made to think he's making love with the woman and that it is part of a love relationship. If you're going to use your sexuality to get money from someone, the only ethical way to do that is to be upfront about it and say, I'm having sex with you because I want you to give me $100 for it. Prostitution is actually even more ethical than what most women do in marriage, which is to seduce the man and make him fall in love with her so that she can take half of his shit. That is just an extremely toxic, psychopathic thing to do. As is the next one, which is false accusations. We're seeing a lot of these days where women bring men up on false accusations, not just false rape accusations, but you see women divorcing men and making false accusations just to get a leg up in court, because in family court, it's not something that has to be proven. So women will make false accusations whenever it behooves them for their purposes, for their gain and their goals. So, professional women do this in the workplace. If there's a man who, they feel like they're competing with in the workplace, they may make false accusations against him to get him fired. So you really have to watch out for that. And then another thing that is very toxic is the shaming language that women use so frequently towards men and other women these days. Women use the word slut towards other women even more than men do. So that's toxic. But of course, women love to shame men even more than that and call us incels. Or not real men, break down our sense of identity that is very psychopathic. Just trying to make someone feel ashamed of themselves, to publicly humiliate them, to devastate their self-esteem. These are psychopathic things. But women love harassment and verbal abuse. As much as they talk about how important it is to communicate with respect and to not be sexist, to respect women, they're not going to do that same thing to us men. They would rather communicate to us in the manner that they have come to define as harassment and verbal abuse, such as swearing, name calling, sexism, which against men is called misandry, trying to break down someone's sense of identity, as I said, is psychopathic. The next big toxic thing that they do is psychological warfare. So being very manipulative and Machiavellian is just the beginning. If they can get information about someone, if they can learn about their emotions, and maybe not even let this person know that they're secretly a rival of them, but become friends with them and form a connection where they can then mine the person for information, learn how to manipulate their feelings, learn what their emotional buttons and triggers are that they can press, or even influence a person. Or they can do this between multiple people, like ex-wives will do with the children of a man. They'll do psychological warfare with the children by saying things to the children that are meant to manipulate the man, basically using other people's minds as a battleground. Women do this stuff, even though it's sick and detrimental to everyone's mental health who's involved. And when these types of things are not enough, the next toxic trait is that women will raise their voice and not allow others to speak. If they're, debating or arguing, and they feel like they're not getting the better of the other person, they'll just raise their voice so that that other person can't be heard. Even screaming, who is known for screaming, men or women? Women. And then another interesting toxic trait is the sexual objectification of both herself and other men and women alike. Women do far more sexual objectification than men do. Men may sexually objectify women in that they are attractive to really hot-looking women, and the more scantily clad, the more sex appeal there is. But that's minor compared to the amount of sexual objectification women place upon everyone, including themselves, ironically. And yet they're the ones who, complain about men doing it to them. That's just bullshit. It's really like a projection is what it is of their own toxic tendency for sexual objectification. It's something they do, I think, even though they don't really like it. They just think like that. That's just something they can't escape. And part of their innate sexism, which brings me to the next one, big toxic trait of theirs is that they are sexist against men. They practice misandry, all right, from anti-male propaganda to actual man-hating hate speech against men, saying things like kill all men at the most extreme. Misandry is constantly coming out of the mouths of women. They don't even realize it because there's no awareness about it, right? It has just been commonly accepted, and they even say that it's not a real thing, that you can't be sexist against a man as a woman. But at the same time, then they love to do the next toxic thing, which is political correctness policing of everyone else. Being woke and trying to spread this, quote, wokeness, which is basically just looking for any issue you can make out of anything that you are not at fault for and someone else is, so that you can virtue signal and, basically try to beat others into submission with your verbal abuses, and campaign against anyone who disagrees with you or uses their free speech to voice opinions that you feel could have been worded differently. And it is just so toxic. It's so oppressive. There's really nothing socially appropriate about it either, or psychologically healthy about it. But they're not psychologically healthy, which leads me to the next, which is the refusal of responsibility and blame shifting. Like children, women refuse to take responsibility for anything they do. They will always shift the blame to someone else, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it requires lying or anything like that. Even if it means them being completely immoral, they're willing to do that. And even if it's hypocritical, which leads me to the next one, which is victim blaming men for female abuses against them. While they're constantly playing the victim, and then saying that you can't victim blame them for male abuses against them, but then they do the same thing against us, which is very toxic. They blame us for female abuses that we have suffered. And that leads me to the next toxic trait, which is that women are even capable of physical violence, especially a unique female brand of it that you generally don't see men doing. They will slap, they will scratch. They have this sort of catty way of fighting. It is something that I think gets their violence not taken as seriously because it's a more feminine brand of violence, but it is still destructive and harmful. I've heard of women commonly gouging each other's face, gouging at their eyes, their cheeks, anything they could do to distort each other's beauty, stuff like that, pulling out huge clumps of each other's hair. And that's just the way that they are with other women. When they attack us men, they can become pretty vicious because of the fact that we are generally bigger and stronger. And what we're just supposed to take it from them and not even have any sort of, boundaries, not even be secure in our own person because we're a man, women get to attack us. No, this is toxic thinking. And the next form of toxic femininity is sexual extremism. So women tend to go on a lot of different sexual extremes. There's like this spectrum of sexuality, and men tend to be very sexually focused on reproductive activity. What we want is to secure a fit, healthy female who we can copulate with on a fairly consistent basis in a pretty heteronormative, sort of cisgendered, reproductive oriented manner. Oftentimes it's just going to be missionary or doggy style for the most part. It's going to be good sex, but it's sex for the purpose of what sex is for, reproduction. Even though we may not be thinking of it like that, we're not saying let's fuck to have kids. It's just like we are going through the motions as an evolutionary machine to, do what sex is for. And that's why our sexual instincts tell us to have sex. Women, on the other hand, tend to do any number of things, from being sexually frigid and asexual, as many women are these days. Many women are just not sexual at all these days. But then on the other end of the spectrum, many women these days are more promiscuous than ever and are hypersexual and sex addicts, or even sexual deviants, who take addiction to the next level, where they become fetishists and they get addicted to one very highly specific atypical form of sexual stimuli, such as the pain of being whipped or something like that. And I'm able to report on these things because I am a sex educator who's been studying these things for over 15 years, about 20 years, I think. I've been practicing sex ed and part of the kink community for over a decade now. And I could tell you that while there are a lot of kinky guys out there, there are not as many, and they are not as kinky as women. When you go into the kink community, it is a female-dominated world. It is highly feminist and gynocentric and matriarchal because of that. It is completely dominated by women because of the fact that women are most of the people there. Because there's more of them, and they are just more sexually active. Women are more sexually active than men are. And that is because sex is more accessible for them, because more men are willing to have sex with more women than women are willing to have sex with men. You understand? The amount of women that a man would have sex with is far more than the amount of men that a woman would have sex with. So this may be confusing, but basically because women basically have their pick for the most part. They have the ability to pick any number of men who would fuck them. They have sex more, even though they themselves are interested in fewer men. They have sex with more because there's more men who are willing to say yes to them. So because women have sex basically exponentially more than most men on average. And that leads me to the next and one of the final big toxic traits in women is that they are spreading STDs. You see, women catch STDs more easily than men due to the large amount of surface area in their vagina for them to do so. And they use condoms less than men because they don't like to have to buy things for sex or plan for it and prepare for it, or talk about having safe sex due to all their sexual issues, right? So women generally don't buy condoms. Men usually are the ones who buy condoms. And, that means women are using them less, right? And then women go on to have sex with more men on average than men do with women. And they are generally more promiscuous and more sexually reckless, which is why they use abortion as a form of contraception, which is also a highly toxic trait. I mean, choosing to murder your own baby instead of just using a condom, which costs $1 or $2. I mean, that right there should tell you just how toxic and psychopathic these bitches are. And then another thing that will show you how psychopathic they are is that some women who get an STD literally make the conscious decision to continue to have unprotected sex in order to try to spread the STD to get revenge on all men on purpose. This again is data that I have as a sex educator because it's been documented in a study in this book, Why Women Have Sex. So if that sounds hard to believe to you, just read the fucking book, all right? And beware of seductive women. Their sexuality might be toxic, quite literally, okay? Their vagina may literally have some toxins in it that could do physical harm to you. So you really do have to beware. And then the last and final toxic trait, perhaps the biggest, is the general emasculation and dehumanization of men. It doesn't get more toxic than that. When they treat us without humanity, when they try to break down our sense of identity and self-esteem, when they treat us like less than human, like we are dogs or like we are dirt that they get to just walk all over. This is extremely immoral, toxic, psychopathic behavior. So those are all of the toxic feminine traits that I could think of to expose. If you can think of any that I forgot to include, please include them in the comments section below. But otherwise, that concludes this talk. I hope I mansplained that well enough for you guys out there. Thank you for listening. Be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things too. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine personal development, living the life you want to as an independent man. And if you can afford to donate, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support funds me doing this work and fighting a good fight for men like you against all of these toxic bitches out there. And you can stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be on the difference between a man and a woman's word. And until then, take care of yourselves, men. No woman out there is going to.